Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning Five here on Friday, March 31st, 2017. I am Dave Biddle. I am joined by Patrick Murphy. Patrick, we had a chance to interview Ohio State running backs coach Tony Alford and cornerbacks coach Kerry Coombs yesterday. Coombs, of course, doubles as special teams coordinator. He's going to have a bigger role in the defense in general this year. But let's start off with running backs coach Tony Alford. You interviewed him. What stood out most to you during your conversation with Coach Alford?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and this kind of came from talking to him and talking to Demario McCall, is that Demario McCall is a running back. And, throughout most of this offseason and even when we were at the Fiesta Bowl, we were under the impression that once the season was over, he would make the move to H-back and kind of step into Curtis Samuel's shoes, same way Curtis did after spending a year running back, backing up Ezekiel Elliott. And that doesn't seem to be the plan, at least as of yet. He has taken no reps at H-back this spring, according to him. Alford called him 100% running back. Now, they both did leave the door open for this potentially to happen over the summer. McCall said that he would, he was under the impression that he'd probably move out to the slot in the summer and into fall camp some and get practice there. But Alford said, as far as I'm concerned, he's a running back. I want to keep him there. He even joked that he would fight Zach Smith. He wouldn't fight Urban, but he would fight Zach Smith to keep him in the running backs room. And Zach and him went back and forth on Twitter a little bit after that. So I thought that was probably the biggest takeaway. I also thought it was interesting that he talked about Mike Weber quite a bit and said he's really growing up. His approach to football has changed quite a bit. He's taking care of his body better. Helping the young players has really become a leader in their room, which, he's a veteran guy now, going into his third year. He's a redshirt sophomore, but, he's not only the returning starter, but the oldest guy. And so it's nice to hear that he's kind of taking on that role that I don't know if they really had last year. Maybe Curtis Samuel was that guy, but not always in that room. And then the other thing was the praise for J.K. Dobbins and kind of the lack of discussion on Antonio Williams. All that Alford had to say on Williams was that, he's been hurt and you can't keep your spot if you're hurt, and J.K.'s looked good, so that's why he stepped over him on the depth chart. And, the only thing he said about Williams' chances to get that number 2 spot back, which is what McCall and Dobbins are fighting for, is to get healthy and get on the field, and that's really all he would say about it.
Regarding McCall staying at running back, it makes a lot of sense to me. First of all, they have Paris Campbell, who they really like at H, and I was one who predicted Demario McCall would be the starting H-back, but now as I think about it, it makes a lot of sense because Paris Campbell, if he can shore up his, pass-catching ability, which I think he will. We watched him in practice. He looks good in practice. The coaches love him. There's a reason Urban Meyer loves him. It's not like he's dropping balls all over the place. He looks very good in practice. And he's a big, strong, physical, super fast guy who's, finally, he was 16 years old, a month before he enrolled at Ohio State. So, actually, he was 16 when he enrolled. He turned 17 a month after he enrolled at Ohio State. He was one of these kids that started school early. So Paris Campbell's just really now coming into his own, I think, as a fourth-year junior. So I really feel like he is made for that H-back spot. I'm excited to see him there. And then, so that leaves Demario McCall. I like him at running back because you need 3 running backs you can count on because of injuries, maybe guys not performing, whatever it might be. You need to go into a season with 3 running backs you can count on. So now they have Mike Weber, they have Demario McCall, and they have J.K. Dobbins. And I agree with you. You can just read between the lines of them just, if they talk about Antonio Williams, it seems to be negative, or they just don't talk about him at all. But McCall being at running back, not H-back, as I look at it now, makes a lot of sense to me, Patrick.
Yeah, and Alford even mentioned, someone asked him about, why do you guys have pretty much run with just one running back, one true running back each of the years you've been here. And he discussed before being willing to rotate guys, but we've never really seen it other than the H-back there. But he said, I think the question was like, why do you need more than one belt, or why do you need more than one if you have one bell cow? And he was like, I want 3 or 4 bell cows. So I think if he has the guys to rotate, especially if they serve different skill sets, which I think these guys do, you could see a little bit more of that, not just Weber and whoever ends up at H-back, likely Paris Campbell, lining up in the backfield, which I think not only helps the running game with the running backs, but could also take some carries off J.T. Barrett.
I had a chance to interview Mike Weber, and I agree with Coach Alford. I can just see the maturity in him. Each year he gets a little more mature. I thought really last year is when you could see a big difference from his true freshman year when he redshirted to his redshirt freshman year. Just talking to him, you could see a more mature young man, and now I'm seeing him become even more mature. And more interestingly than that, I wanted to know what he wants to improve at the most. And he said, he wants to improve his entire game. But I said, what's one specific thing you want to get better at? What are you working on right now? And he said, breaking tackles. And that's something, and he even said, little things like that. I'm thinking that's not a little thing. Breaking tackles is a huge thing, but you don't hear running backs say that, and I like that. And he's like, I'm working on breaking tackles. I mean, that is such a huge facet of being a running back, and you don't hear running backs talk about that. They'll talk about this and that, but just, I want to get better at noticing the backside guy who I might not see right away and being able to break that tackle. I love hearing that from Mike Weber.
Yeah, and I think it's important for a guy like him. Fans got so used to Ezekiel Elliott's speed, and that's world-class speed. I mean, he's an elite athlete. And Weber, while a very good running back, just doesn't have that same kind of speed, so he's got to be able to find a way to make those long runs other ways, and breaking tackles is a way to do that. Things like stiff arms and whatnot to kind of get past those guys, and he's not just going to burn them like Zeke did. He's got to fight through, and he's got the size to do it. So it's good to hear that that's something he's working on, because I think we saw last year at times he would get tripped up or caught from behind and things like that. And if he can fight through those things, it's going to lead to more touchdowns for the Buckeyes.
We also interviewed the very caffeinated Kerry Coombs, never lacking energy. He was even in rare form for even his standards yesterday. He was fired up. He was kind of not getting into it with reporters. Like in a fun way, he was like going back and forth with reporters. It was a really cool interview. I invite people to watch our video interview with Kerry Coombs on the site. And he's really proud of the fact that the Buckeyes have now come up with this scheme that really nobody else does, where they rotate their corners. And if they did it last year when they had Marshawn Lattimore and Garyon Conley, a couple of future first-rounders, where, and Lattimore's a future top 6 pick, and they're rotating Denzel Ward in there and Damon Arnett, I mean, they're going to keep doing it. And Kerry Coombs was adamant they're going to keep doing it this year. It looks like Denzel Ward and Damon Arnett right now are running with the ones. Kendall Sheffield's mixing in there. But no surprise to hear Combs say that, but they really, really like the rotation, and they're going to do it again this year, Patrick.
Yeah, which I think is great. I think once they trusted a third corner, and that ended up being Denzel Ward last year, it made life easier for Garyon and Marshawn, just like at any position. I think the fact that these guys know coming in that the rotation is a positive thing, they're not looking at it as, oh, I'm losing snaps. They're looking at it as, hey, I can be, fresh on the field when I'm out there. We've heard it with the defensive line for years since they've had the talent to rotate there. And I think other positions are starting to do it and take note of what it can do for the individual. Obviously it's worked out well. I mean, you look at the first round picks coming out of Ohio State and the talent that they're then bringing in, the players get it, which is good to see, and Combs should be proud of it, because the fact that not only that they figured out to do it, but that they can do it speaks a lot to the coaching staff.
And Kerry Coombs did say they're going to use rotation again. It's either going to be 3 or 4. And so you're thinking, obviously Ward, Arnett, Sheffield. And if they go to 4, there's going to be one more. But he did mention 7 corners will play. They might not rotate in there, but they're going to get in the game a little bit on defense. They're going to play on special teams. So you're talking about Rajay Burns being a sophomore, and then the true freshmen, early enrollees, Jeffrey Okudah, Sean Wade, Marcus Williamson. Kerry Coombs said all those guys are going to play. The exact quote was, they're going to play a lot of snaps. So all 7 corners are going to play, so they have a lot of depth there. These things have a way of working themselves out with injuries and guys not performing, but they have a lot of depth there. Not a lot of experience, but a lot of talent there. So I found that very interesting. He didn't just say all 7 guys are going to play. All 7 guys are going to play, Patrick, and they're all going to get a lot of snaps.
Yeah, and I think, right now that's a lot easier to say than it is following the Indiana game when not as many guys end up playing unless that game then becomes a blowout. But, I think that is the intention, and I think it should be the intention. Now, whether it really happens or not, we'll see in the fall. But you mentioned Rajay Burns, and I think that's a guy that's rather interesting because he's not, one of the guys who played a ton last year, but he did play. He's not one of the highly recruited freshmen that are coming in. So I think he's kind of been lost. But, of those guys that had nice interceptions last year, he was one of them. Yes, it was against Bowling Green. Yes, it was in, blowout time. But, he did that. And we've seen him a couple times in practice this spring, intercept, not Tate Martell, but necessarily, but He's intercepted Joe Burrow once, I believe, on a pretty nice catch, if I remember correctly. So I think the big knock on him has kind of been his speed, if I remember correctly, but I think that he's certainly learning. He's got some experience, which is more than the true freshman can say. And it'll be interesting to see if he can work his way into some sort of rotation there.
Greg Schiano is, of course, the safeties coach as well as the defensive coordinator, but with Schiano running the defense, Kerry Coombs is, coaching the safeties a little bit more this year. Still Schiano's group, but Coombs is helping out more with the safeties this year, and we got a chance to talk to him about that situation. Obviously, Damon Webb is the one returning starter in the secondary. They call it the Falcon position. And then right now, Eric Smith is the one that's going to take over for Malik Hooker if they had a game right now as a starter. But Kerry Coombs said Jordan Fuller will rotate in the game. He said there's no reason, the quote is, there is no reason that Eric Smith and Jordan Fuller can't rotate. So if you think there's just going to be a rotation at corner, no, it looks like they're going to rotate at safety this year as well. Maybe it'll be a three-man rotation where even Damon Webb comes off the field occasionally to keep those guys fresh. So for those that are wondering, is it going to be Eric Smith or Jordan Fuller? It sounds like it might be both of them. Those guys might rotate, maybe not 50-50, but both those guys are going to play for sure.
Yeah, and I talked to Jordan, and he was, everything he said when asked about potentially starting was we, and, talking about the position group. And I asked him, I was like, you keep using we. I was like, are you expecting this to be a rotation? Because we've heard about it a little bit from Schiano, and he said, yeah, right now there's no starter. He said all three of us are, playing about the same amount of snaps. So they look at it that way. They look at it as a group effort. I asked him if he would, how excited it would be to be the starter on opening day, to be that first guy out on the field when the defense takes the field. And he said it would be, but he's, made it clear that whether it's, that first snap, that first rotation, or if he comes in for the second or third series or however they work it out, he expects to play. He expects to see the field just as much as the rest of the guys. And they like that. Like we said at the corners, it keeps them fresh. It provides a lot of playing time for everybody. So, I think when they see talent, they're going to get on the field, on the defense at least, one way or the other.
Great stuff as always out of Patrick Murphy. Thank you very much, Patrick, and thanks to all the listeners out there for tuning into the show. I appreciate it, and I hope you have a great day and a great weekend. Let's hear some Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.